Mike, so like when you kind of like got into like the deal to buy like rural like telecom stations, as far as I understood, right? And you like you have the money to like back it up, right? And been kind of like on short terms with like governors as well as like high level political people. So like how did this influence like your reputation as well as kind of your position in the eyes of those people? I'm just curious about that.
It was hard. It's hard, even when you're young, it's hard to be taken seriously. I mean, if you're asking me personally, um, two of us were very young. We had one partner who was a little older, and she actually had deep relationships in the regulatory. She was the one that helped us uh, uh, basically work out the regulatory arrangements and helped us find the politicians that supported us. But we were not viewed as credible business people because I mean I was a product manager I was a guy who managed a product for a reasonably successful company, but still small. And then I had a failed startup, right? And in this team, the three of us were all interchangeable, doing everything we could, but our roles kind of ended up as Anne was the kind of the external person. She was dealing with a lot of the external relationships. Um, Bob was the um, Bob was the technical person, and Bob, by the way, brilliant. He had an undergrad at Stanford engineering, a PhD in Yale economics, and a Harvard law degree. And he got that. He was a little older than me, but he went full out on all the education. And this was kind of one of his first. He worked at LCI for about 6 months, and that was his professional experience. But like 50 IQ points more than me, really, really smart. But even that qualification wasn't enough for the investors. So I think my reputation grew more as a result of working with them and proving that, you know, proving my value to them. But I think I was honestly kind of a cost to the deal to the investors. Like, yeah, these are nice people. We don't really care if they're around. We appreciate everything they're doing, but we're gonna bring some other people on, and they were sort of indifferent as to whether we stayed along. In fact, it's kind of troubling. A lot of investors have trouble with founders who are not leading the business when they invest because they can cause a lot of problems. And that kind of happened a little bit. It's a good question because I think for me, I embraced the opportunity. I was young. It's like I can learn from these people. And this is not my last deal. Never thought I'd get there anyway. My other two founders really dug in, and they really wanted leadership roles. They really were bitter that they weren't running the company. And I think we had very different experiences. So I had an opportunity to work closely with Welsh Carson and some other investors, and it paid off. I ended up getting in other deals outside of this as a result of that. But yeah, being a 20 something, you want to be confident and you want to present like you know what you're doing, but I think people can see through it if you're faking it too much. And I think for me, I had to prove to these guys that I was, more than just lucky for coming up with a great idea and hustling and giving, basically a year and a half of time for free with no certainty of payoff. They respected that, but they didn't really trust me to run their business.
When you were like talking to these investors and VCs throughout your career, how did you find it was the best way to brand yourself and kind of like let them know how effective you could be or in the long run or how promising your business would be so that they would create like be able to build trust in you?
Yeah, so it's tough, and we talked a little bit about this in my class. I think Luke, I think you were there. I thought I saw Rob in there too, but I think the John Faella, who I think is going to be a judge next week, and we talk about this quite a bit. Young founders usually screw it up, right? And I screwed it up too. You either they end up going one or two directions. One is the overconfident, the facts and the truth are never enough, and they one up the truth, and they start selling when they don't need to be selling. The other is they get lulled in by sophisticated investors, and they kind of get worked a bit. Where, hey, just tell me this, we're friends, we're going to help you out, we got your back, and you let your guard down, and you kind of get a little bit too relaxed, and you want to be honest. First of all, you have to be honest, but you don't need to give them a blueprint to show how your business, all the ways your business is going to fail, right? So I was more the open book. So I built trust. They trusted everything I said, but I was a little bit more of an overshare. I told them the good and the bad, but ultimately it was pretty effective in terms of building trust. They trusted everything I said, which as you get older, you learn that building that trust, not that you abuse it or but earning that trust gives you the right to take a position sometimes that might be a little more aggressive. This guy is so honest about everything else. I believe him when he says that they can get customers acquired for $75 because he wouldn't tell me if he didn't think that was true. So, building trust is really critical, but young founders, and I struggle with it too. I always had feedback that says, hey, you're too honest with these guys. Like you don't need to tell them all of what you're telling them. So it's just kind of it's really a balancing act. But I've also seen more often, I see young founders that I've worked with that I'm always pulling them back, and they're again what I call one-upping the truth. It's like, hey, what was your churn last month? We lost, it was 3%. We lost 3% of our customer base. And, but it was a one-time thing because blah, 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 even though it wasn't a one-time thing. The honest answer might be, we got 3% churn. Here are the things that are affecting that. We think we can manage through this, and this. But the always like any bad news is explained away and, everything's great. That story doesn't work, especially for young founders, because they don't believe it. And sophisticated investors know things are bad and things are screwed up in a lot of ways. They just kind of want to hear how you deal with it. But yeah, it's tough. You have to make some mistakes. And I was fortunate I had really good mentors around me that would tell me, hey, you're screwing up. You said way too much in that meeting. Just stop talking, and answer the question. But don't give them the answer plus like 5 ways the business is going to blow up, which I would do. Ironically, it was that though approach that got me into other deals, because I had an investor who's now the chief investment officer of Blackstone, who had worked with early in my career, and I think he appreciated the fact that I would go into a situation and I would always tell him the truth, even if it was really, really bad. So there is value there, but it's a tough line to balance. But ultimately, if you're authentic and you're honest, that's the way to do it. Just be yourself.
Yeah.
There's a lot. I do like startups and startup investors because they accept a lot of idiosyncrasies. I was never a polished salesperson. I was I consider myself a little bit rough now, but I was even rougher when I was in my 20s. And polish isn't always a benefit to startups. They expect their founders to be a little bit quirky and weird sometimes, which I liked. I mean, that was my place.
I feel like you got to have a little bit of crazy in you in order to be an entrepreneur. So
You do. You got to be a little weird, really. I mean, in a lot of people's eyes, you're going to do things that a lot of people don't understand.
for sure.
Does anybody else have any more questions for Mike before we proceed? No? Awesome. Okay, so Mike, at this point in your life, you've worked with Paul Quealy. You're buying assets off Verizon up to $1 billion.
Let's be clear. I never worked with Paul Quealy, but worked with his firm.
You worked with his firm.
Yeah.
He ends up becoming a very rich man, a notable UR alumni. At this point in your life, you're probably working like 80-hour, 100-hour weeks, right? Tell me a little bit about the work-life balance as an entrepreneur and how it affected you.
It was tough. I mean, fortunately, I married well in the sense that my wife knew what she was getting. Like expectations were so low that because we were dating when I was starting businesses and we were married. So, I mean, a lot of marriages wouldn't support that. But the toughest in that stage, and it got tougher even as I got older, which we can talk about it later. But our business was started in Washington D.C. in a law firm. We were renting an office in a law firm. We grew, had our own office, and when we finally got it funded, the investors wanted to put it in Dallas, and we kind of agreed. We wanted to try to keep it in D.C., but they really, for good reason, since our assets were there, put it in Dallas. So I had a brand new baby, newborn, and I forgot the fact that my wife was pretty pregnant at the tail end of our fundraising efforts, and we didn't know if we were going to raise money or not. And so things luckily came together in a pretty well timed way. But for the first 6 months, I was living in Dallas, and I'd see her maybe every week, maybe every 2 weeks. And Big Brain Bob, as we said, the guy from Stanford, Harvard, Yale, we used to call him Big Brain Bob. He and I would sleep in the office. I mean, we just sleep there. Like I'd get up, start working at 5:30, and we just this was after we got funded, and we would go and work all night sometimes. And at the same time, though, we thought we were so rich. It didn't prove out to be that way. We thought we'd hit it so big Like we would, I mean, it was work hard, play hard. We'd go out 2 hours. We'd go to Morton's. We spent like crazy money we didn't even have because we were on paper. We're like, this is huge. Like we've hit it. Um, Little did we know the whole market would collapse probably a year later, and it was fairly humbling and financially jarring. Um, but yeah, it was that balance. There was no balance. It was 100 hours, more than 100-hour weeks at that time. When the team got built out, it kind of leveled off, and it became a little bit more manageable. But that's the big downside. There was no balance at that stage for me. Fortunately, my wife was okay with it. She wasn't okay with it, but she knew about it. And it was always like, we're just going to, it was always a year at a time. This will be this way for 6 months. Well, probably more like 6 months of this is going to get better. Then another 6 months is going to get better. And, after like 5 series of that, it kind of got better, maybe.